Hey guys, Will here. So today we're taking a look at a really exciting new wheel from Cube Controls. This is the Astra, and it's caused quite a stir in the sim racing markets of late for quite a few interesting reasons. So cast your mind back a couple of years now, we took a look at the F-Core wheel from Cube Controls. That was their first sort of more affordable sim racing wheel, and the philosophy there was to do away with a lot of the features that you don't necessarily need for sim racing and just focus on absolutely nailing the fundamentals. So the Astra wheel essentially builds upon that philosophy but adds in a couple more features that are becoming more common on modern day sim racing wheels, but still tries to come in at a relatively affordable price point without doing away with the essentials that you need to drive quickly and consistently. So does it earn a place on your sim rig? That's what we're here to find out today. Let's dig into it. Okay, so quite a bit to get through today, but firstly, as always, a big thank you to Cube Controls for sending across this wheel for us to check out. Now, as we always like to do here at Boosted Media, we will be cross-comparing this against a few competitor products in today's video, so it's important that you guys are aware that all the products we'll be talking about today were all sent to us under the exact same conditions. Now, if you do decide you want to pick up this wheel or any other sim racing gear for that matter, head over to boostedmedia.net. There you will find a whole bunch of affiliate links and discount codes, which are an awesome way of helping save yourselves a little bit of money and helping the channel out in the process at no additional cost. We really appreciate your support there. But as is always the case here at Boosted Media, no third party, including Cube Controls, has any input into this video whatsoever. Everything I'll be talking about is purely just my own observations and my own opinions, having used this wheel for a couple of weeks now. So without further ado, let's dive in and check it all out, starting with pricing. Now, I don't want to get completely bogged down in pricing comparisons here and make this video any longer than it needs to be. So if you're interested in a full breakdown and comparison with regards to that, head over to boostedmedia.net or follow the link down in the description or the pinned comment below for our written review. You'll get a lot more detail there. But to give you a basic idea here and a couple of comparisons just quickly, you're looking at €399 plus VAT for this particular wheel, according to the Cube Controls website at the time we're making the video. We do have a couple of reseller partners on our website that do offer discounts to you guys. So just make sure you do shop around just to make sure you're getting the best possible deal depending on where you are in the world. So that is the starting price. And then also have a premium version, which is what we have in the desk in front of us today. That comes in at €449 plus VAT. And that comes with the addition of anodized aluminium touch points for our 7-way switches, our thumb encoders, and our rotary encoders on the front, available in both black and blue. And it also comes with the addition of better quality stickers and the hub adapter that you see on the back here that adapts the back of the wheel from 50 millimeters to 70 millimeters, which most people are likely going to need. And as you can see, it is quite crowded behind the wheel here with the shifters being so close. So I think most people probably end up going with the premium version, but you do have the option for the cheaper version if you don't require that. So it does come in at a similar price point to the F-Core Evo wheel. The feature set is quite different though. This does require a physical USB connection to your PC, whereas the F-Core and F-Core Evo both are able to also connect via Bluetooth, so you can have completely wireless operation. This wheel does, on the other hand, have programmable RGB lighting that we'll take a look at in detail throughout today's video, and is a slightly larger diameter at 295 millimeters as well. So which one's going to be best for you will ultimately come down to where your subjective preference lies within the feature set, but we'll give you a good breakdown of all of the features of this wheel as we get on through today's video. So in terms of other alternatives that sit at a relatively similar price point within the mainstream market, at least, you've got wheels like the GT Neo, which is quite a bit cheaper than this wheel from SimMagic. You've got the SimMagic FX as well, which is a little bit more expensive than the GT Neo, but more similarly priced to this guy. You've got the Conspit 300 GT, which we're yet to review yet, but we will be checking that out very soon. You can see that does also include a nice little screen there too. So a bit more going on here in terms of features, but the overall feeling of the wheel, the switch gear and so forth, isn't quite on the same level as what we have the Cube Controls, but stay tuned for our full review of that wheel coming very soon. You've also then got wheels like the GSI X29 that we looked at recently. This wheel is a little bit more feature rich than that X29 is, and also does come in at a significantly cheaper price point. And then of course you've got the F-Core and F-Core Evo that we were just mentioning before. But again, head over to our written review for a more detailed breakdown on those comparisons. So what exactly are you getting for the money here in terms of build quality and feature set? Let's dive into that now. So starting off with materials, we've got a full aluminium construction with this wheel, which I'm very happy to see. So that means the front plate, the entire front plate, And the rear housing is all aluminium. Aluminium touch points, as we were saying before, for our rotary encoders, our 7-way switches, and our thumb encoders. We also have 2 little metal toggle switches on the top here. The button faces themselves are plastic. And then we've got 5mm thick genuine carbon fiber paddles for our clutches and shifters on the back of the wheel. So high quality materials throughout this entire build. And one of the most impressive things about this wheel, not only just holding it in your hands without even having it connected to a car, but also driving in the sim, is just how light this wheel is. Comes in at 1.15 kilograms. And that is around 200 to 500 grams lighter than a lot of other wheels that sit in this kind of market segment. So the main advantage of that is less rotating mass on your wheelbase. Less rotating mass means that the force feedback is able to react more quickly, more sharply, and it just makes things feel a little bit more detailed and a little bit more immersive in many cases as well. Particularly if you're running a wheelbase that has less than 10 Newton meters of strength, that is definitely something that you will appreciate. So they've definitely made some intelligent design choices there. Very good weight distribution on this wheel too. Some other wheels that we've tested over the years do tend to be a little bit top heavy, and that can feel a little bit awkward under some driving conditions. So definitely all good design choices. We've got a diameter of 295 millimeters, which sits at bang right in the middle of the sweet spot, at least in my opinion, for driving a variety of cars between GT3, GT4, and of course Formula style as well. The F-Core, as I mentioned before, is just a little bit smaller diameter at 290 millimeters. And again, that will also, just like the weight of the wheel, have an impact on how your force feedback feels as well. So the smaller the diameter, the sharper and more responsive the wheel is going to feel overall. As you go larger, you have more of a damping effect on your force feedback. So of course, being a butterfly style wheel, you're not going to be doing things like rally or drift or street cars with this kind of wheel, but across the entire spectrum of cars that you might want to drive with a wheel of this kind of style, I think this is right smack bang in the sweet spot in terms of diameter. Grip material as well, we've got nice rubberized grips here. Now you've heard me say in a lot of other wheel reviews of this style that a lot of the grips that people are using these days do have a tendency to pick up dirt and debris, skin cells from your hands and so forth, and they can get quite grubby over time. Now you can see just a few little flakes of dust. If I rub the wheel like that, you can see it picks up a bit of skin off my unexfoliated hands as well. But in general, I do quite like the grip material that they've used here. It does have a little bit more grip to it than what we find on the F Pro from Cube Controls, for example. That doesn't have that kind of clammy feel to it either, but it's a lot more slippery than this is. This is definitely going to feel more grippy driving with bare hands. I didn't have any issues whatsoever with the material rubbing off and making my hands go black like we see on some other wheels as well. So that was all absolutely fine. And the grips themselves are relatively stiff. There's a little bit of squish there, but yeah, I think they've done a really good job here. Ergonomically as well, we'll get into that in the driving experience later on, but they are very, very comfortable grips. And in case you're wondering, they have a maximum thickness right in the middle here of 41 millimeters or 4.1 centimeters. Being an open style wheel like this, we do often see some wheels have quite a bit of twist in the bottom of them. Now, generally that's something on most wheels that's only noticeable if you sort of intentionally twist the wheel. But if you do have a habit of steering and kind of pushing with your wrists as you steer, you do notice that flex on quite a few other wheels that are around this kind of market segment. No issues whatsoever to speak of with regards to that with this wheel. It is very rigid throughout the entire design, which of course I was very happy to see. So in terms of other features here, you do have all the basics covered. It doesn't have any particularly, amazing or groundbreaking features in terms of button configuration or anything like that, but we've got flag LEDs on either side, all the RGB LED lighting across the entire wheel. So flag LEDs, RPM strip, and all the button LEDs that you can see here, including the little Cube Controls logo in the middle, are all completely addressable and programmable. So you can configure that through Cube Controls' own CubeSet software or SimHub, which we'll show you when we get into the software section in just a little while. So essentially your imagination is the limit when it comes to what you can do with all of the lighting on this wheel. It is worth just noting that we do have 2 individual LEDs which are individually addressable in this little logo here. So you can actually have a nice little contrast between 2 colors on the logo if you wish to do so. And although the default profile that comes with the wheel in SimHub at the time of making this video doesn't include any reactive button presses or anything like that, I did speak to Daniel from Daniel Newman Racing, and he did tell me he is working on a profile for this wheel as we speak. So we will have things like reactive button presses that change color when you activate and so forth coming very soon for this wheel for people that subscribe to his service. And I'm sure there'll be other profiles available within the Cube Controls community as well within no time. It usually takes a couple of months for these things to sort of come to fruition whenever a new wheel comes out. So yeah, it's very much in its infancy with regards to that at the moment. But again, sky's the limit. Imagination is really the only limitation there when it comes to what you can do with lighting on this wheel. So in terms of quality of the touch points, they have revised the button design for this particular wheel. This is the first time we've seen these buttons on a Cube Controls wheel. And I've got to say, I do really like them. They've got a really nice firm snap to them, quite a short travel, only about a 1 millimeter travel by my measurement, if that. Most other wheels in this kind of market segment have tended to go in this direction. So there's not too many wheels, and the ones that we compared to earlier in the pricing section all have very similar feeling, very snappy buttons on them as well. So certainly nothing here that stands out against the competition. Just a couple of things of note here for those who will be driving in VR. The design that they've got here with these shrouds around the buttons does make it very easy to feel without looking exactly where your thumb is when you're trying to push the buttons. So definitely a good experience driving with VR. The one complaint that I did have about the buttons, and it was only these two buttons here on either side, so these four. I did find that if you push off center occasionally, and it doesn't happen every single time, but if you don't catch the button square, it does have a tendency to just catch a little bit, and sometimes you don't get an accurate button press. So it will be interesting to see whether anybody else notices that. It did happen on all four of these buttons, so I don't think that it was a manufacturing defect, but there were a couple of times. You can see in here now, if I push that button right on the top edge, it's not actually clicking in, it's not actually activating. I have to push more center to make it do that. So just one little thing that I noticed there. The rotary encoders have a nice solid click or detent in each position. So absolutely no issues there whatsoever. Not the stiffest ones that I've felt, but certainly not the lightest either. And if we compare to something like the Conspit wheel, for example, these are noticeably less snappy in each position. But again, look, compared to the majority of wheels on the market around this price point, I don't think that they're particularly outstanding, but they certainly get the job done. No issues whatsoever driving with or without gloves. Now, we don't have any special functionality here. So a lot of other wheels that we're seeing these days do have like a second function that you can map. So if you hold a button and then push or do something like that, you can map this to a second function inside the sim. So maybe just turning it normally might be your traction control, and then you hold down a button and turn it and it becomes your brake bias. None of that kind of functionality on this particular wheel, but again, we'll take you through the software section and show you exactly what you can and can't do in just a minute. We've got our 7-way switches on either side. I do always like wheels that have 2 of these. That allows you to map one of these to navigating through menus, for example, so you don't have to use your keyboard and mouse for games that support it, of course. And then you can map the other one to your black box inside the car or your pit menu or something like that. So I do always appreciate that. And these are the same ones that we've seen on other Cube Controls wheels in the past. So again, nice clicks in each position and a nice solid click in each direction. So you've got left, right, up, down, push button, and rotary encoder functionality for each of those. We then got our thumb encoders above that. Again, these have got a nice solid snap in each position. Again, comfortable to drive with or without gloves. They're not loose like what you find on the Fanatec Formula wheels, for example, so there's no sort of vagueness in the rotation. You've got a very clear understanding of whether you've clicked it or not, which is always a good thing, and that goes for driving with or without gloves on as well. One thing we did notice is there isn't any push button functionality on those thumb encoders. Some other wheels do have that functionality, so that's just one little thing to note. We then got little toggle switches up the top, and I do like the fact that they've recessed these quite a bit. It does protect them from accidental damage. One of the things I have had happen to me on some other wheels is, you know, if the wheel gets out of control and flips around on you, it can catch your hand or your glove and actually break that switch. I had that happen on one of my Fanatec Formula wheels a couple of years ago. So yeah, nice to see that they recessed that in nicely. And you can see there is a little LED on those as well, so you can have that activate or deactivate when you enable or disable your headlights or your windscreen wipers or something like that, for example. So yeah, nothing particularly groundbreaking here, but again, all of the core features that you would expect on a sim racing wheel of this type all covered here very nicely. And again, you do have the addition of the flag LEDs, which will respond to the track status and also work as a spotter when you've got a car alongside you if you wish to use them that way. You've got your programmable RPM strip and your little Cube Controls logo illuminated in there as well. So flipping the wheel around now, there are a couple of interesting things here. So firstly, you'll notice there's quite an intricate design when it comes to the rear shell of this wheel. Now, I mentioned before, it is all aluminium. You can see extra ribbing here to make sure that it is nice and strong. And yeah, as I mentioned before, absolutely no issues whatsoever with regards to flex or twist or anything crazy like that. Very, very, very solid overall, despite its extremely lightweightedness, which is really great to see. I've got a new design here for their shifter and analog paddle mechanism too. So you'll remember on the F Core wheel that we reviewed previously, this housing was like a glass infused or carbon infused plastic material. And it did mean that there was a little bit of flex there, which I know did bother some people, including myself to an extent. Happy to report now that is all aluminium. So very, very, very solid throughout there. You can see there is a little tiny bit of movement there if I really go crazy and pull on that paddle as hard as I can, but definitely nothing that bothers me when I'm driving. You might be able to see in there on camera a tiny little bump stop too. So what that means is you do have a cushioned bump stop when you release the shifter. Now, if you really slam it back, it is quite loud, but when you're driving just normally, as long as you keep your finger on the shifter, they actually are very quiet, as you can hear now. So when I was driving, this was actually one of the quietest wheels I've driven with using magnetic shifters. And a lot of people I know will say, oh, that's not really an issue. You can't hear it over your headphones anyway. But if you are driving in a shared environment, you've got somebody trying to sleep or study nearby, or neighbors that are fussy, that is definitely something that either you or they will appreciate every single time you drive with this wheel. Nice snappy action there. We don't have any adjustability in terms of the actual throw, but you can see we do have some additional holes there, which mean we're able to move that paddle in by 5 or 10 millimeters, or on the case of the analog paddle, move it in by 5 millimeters. Nice, good throw there on the analog paddle too. As you can see, we do have the ability to configure that as individual axes or a bite point clutch, as you'll see in the software a little bit later on. They are using Hall effect sensors throughout here, so we don't have any mechanical moving parts that can wear out and lose their calibration over time, which is a good thing. And although we don't have any adjustability in terms of the angle and throw here, one thing I have noticed on some older Cube Controls wheels is that the wheels that do have that adjustability, like their R-Spec shifters, for example, did have a tendency, at least in my experience, to work their way loose and start to move around a little bit over time. And I did actually have an endurance race once where one of my shifters came loose, and I had to sort of, really be careful with my shifting while I was driving until I was able to get into the pits and adjust that while somebody else was driving and lock it down. So my preference is generally for shifters that fit the ergonomic design of the wheel overall and account for all size and shapes of hands, rather than, excessive adjustability that can cause issues with flex and movement over time. So yeah, no complaints there whatsoever. You can see that nice thick carbon fiber again for these shifter paddles, as we were talking about before, 5 millimeters thick. And then we've got our aluminium hub here. As we mentioned before, this doesn't come included in the base model. If you pay the €50 more to get the premium model, then that does come with that hub. And you can see it's got a standard 50 millimeter 3-stud mounting pattern on the back here, but because it is so crowded here, you will have issues trying to mount a standard quick release in there. So more than likely, you will need this little hub adapter to adapt it to either 50 mil or 70 millimeter and just space it out a little bit, so you're not going to have any crowding issues when you mount it to your quick release of choice. I just had it mounted with the zero play quick release from HRS, which just bolts directly on there and then mates up with my wheelbase. But given the spacing here, it is clear of the shifters, so you're not going to have any issues mounting any 70 millimeter or 50 millimeter bolt pattern quick release onto the back of the wheel, provided that you have the hub here. So just a couple more things to mention here. We do have a little power button. Now, even though this wheel doesn't have a battery or Bluetooth connectivity, it will stay lit up all the time that there's power applied to the wheel unless you switch it off here. So I'm glad to see they do have that power button, and quite a few other wheels on the market with RGB lighting don't have a power button, which means you have to unplug them or switch your rig off at the wall to shut off the lights when you're not driving. So a good little addition there. And then lastly, we've got the familiar magnetic Q-Con connector for our power and USB. That has been used on Cube Controls wheels for a number of years now. And yeah, in case you're wondering, in case you haven't seen it before, you get a nice coiled USB cable that looks like this. And yeah, it just plugs in to the back like so. You've got little metal pogo pins internally here. Now, when they first released this design, I did have my questions. I was a little bit worried that we might see things like metal debris get sucked up by the magnet here and short the pins on the connection, which of course, if it's plugged into your USB port on your PC, could be a bad day, although most motherboards these days have short protection built into them anyway. But yeah, we've been using this connector for 3.5, almost 4 years now, and never had a single issue. It's lasted the test of time. And yeah, I really like the design because it does mean that if your wheel does go crazy for some reason, it wraps up and your cable gets all twisted around the wheelbase, it will disconnect itself before it causes any damage. But we've never once had an instance, and I've done a couple of full championship seasons, so probably spent well over 300-400 hours driving with this connection now, and I've never once had one of these come unplugged on me when I didn't want it to. So yeah, absolutely no complaints about that design whatsoever. One more quick thing with regards to connection too, you may have noticed if you've got a keen eye, there is a little pin header just inside the hollow hub here on the back of the wheel. That will allow you to internally connect through to your wheelbase if you have a supported quick release. So Cube Controls themselves actually have a quick release which has that pass-through functionality, and then you have a USB cable on the wheelbase side which connects through to your PC. So you can make use of that functionality as well, should you wish to do so. Unfortunately, although it is using standard USB protocol, it's not a standard USB connector like a USB-C port or something like that. So you may have to get a little bit creative if you're wanting to use it with something like an Acertech quick release, for example. But it's good to see that functionality there for those who don't want to make use of the QCon connector. And I think that is everything you need to know in terms of the physical hardware. So let's take a quick look at the software side of things, and then we can get into our driving impressions and conclusions. Okay, so time for a quick look at the software side of things. So you've got the Cube Controls CubeSet software, which we have seen previously on some of their other wheels, but you also have full SimHub integrations. So every single switch, every single LED is all individually addressable through SimHub, which we'll look at in just a moment. But just to give you a quick run through the CubeSet software, look, this is still pretty basic software. I was kind of hoping that they might have fleshed this out a little bit more by now, given that the first time I remember reviewing a wheel with this software was way back at the start of 2022 with their F Pro wheel. So look, I mean, the basics are covered here, but it's certainly nothing particularly special. So I've got the ability to calibrate our two analog paddles, left and right. There's also a pulse width adjustment here that allows you to adjust how long the duration is for each pulse or each movement of the rotary encoders. That is a great way of making sure that the encoders respond in the sim exactly the way you want them to. We've got a tab for we'll skip over RGB just for now, go to paddles. So we're going to assign whether we want to have just individually addressable axes by disabling the bite point, or we can have our left or our right shifter paddle as our primary. So that way we pull in both shifters. When we release one or the other one, it will go to our bite point, and then we release down from there to fully disengage the clutch. Works exactly the same way as most other wheels with a bite point clutch. You can adjust the bite point here in the software, or you can assign it to a rotary encoder like so. And now when we wind up and down that rotary encoder, you can see it goes by 0.1% increments. Now, a lot of other wheels these days do have smarter ways of doing this. They will give you fine and coarse adjustment, for example. So your right-hand side might be your coarse adjustment for 1% or maybe even 10% increments. And then your left-hand side might be your fine adjustment for 0.1 or 0.01% increments. So you can really dial in nice and quickly. A lot of other wheels as well do use the RPM strip across the top. So say, for example, 5 green LEDs and 2 red LEDs would be 52% and so forth. So there's definitely some things that they could do here to improve this, just to give you a visual representation without having to look at the software to see exactly where your bite point is set. So then click down on device. This just allows you to do things like firmware updates, and it does have a check update button. So it is a relatively straightforward process, or you can manually flash a file if you wish to do so. An about tab here, which literally just gives you the logo, the URL, the version of CubeSet that you're running, and the firmware version. Then we've got the RGB tab, which gives us a little bit more functionality here. So we can set a master color for the entire wheel. One thing I did notice is that white, as is selected now, definitely does look a little bit on the blue side on the wheel itself, and that same kind of goes for all of the different colors here. So if we click on red, for example, you can see it is still shining through with a bit of a blue hue. So if we go to yellow or green, for example, you can see how that blue tint in the switches themselves is having a bit of an impact on that color. So obviously the bluer side of the spectrum shines through really nicely, but as we get down into our green, yellow, orange, and red, and white, definitely a little bit shifted there in the color spectrum. So just something to be aware of there. We then have the ability to set individual colors for each of the LEDs from the software here too. So we just click on the one that we want to adjust, and we can choose whatever color we want just through the standard Windows color palette tool there. And as I mentioned before, we do have addressability for the 2 LEDs behind the logo here. So if you want to go, say, something like that, for example, you can do that. You can go nuts and adjust things to your heart's content. So once you've made those adjustments, you click on Save Setting, flashes it to the wheel, and you are good to go. So that is literally all you really need the CubeSet software for. Once we open up SimHub, as I will do now, you can see our LED settings from the CubeSet software are overwritten, and now we have complete control and addressability with telemetry-based inputs for all of those LEDs. So if you're already familiar with SimHub, this works exactly as you would expect. You add it as a device, and it's going to bring up all the settings pertaining to your particular wheel. So you do have a separate tab here for LEDs and controls. You can assign individual buttons or encoders to various different controls here for increasing, decreasing brightness, color presets, telemetry, LEDs, button lighting, and so forth. Over on the LED tab here, we do have an adjustment for brightness. So we can go from all the way off to relatively dim and all the way up to maximum brightness there, which I think is more than bright enough for the majority of people. We've got a couple of LED presets here as well, which you can edit. So we click on each one. And then down here, we've got the ability to choose our profiles for both the button lighting and the telemetry LEDs. So again, at the moment, we do only have the default profile at the time that we're recording this video, but you can go into here and configure this, make adjustments, have it react to button presses and completely customize it to your heart's content, or just run a profile from the likes of Daniel Newman Racing, which we'll be releasing soon for this particular wheel. So definitely check him out if you haven't done previously. Down below that, we've got a couple of settings for our default lighting, but again, all of these settings are exactly the same as they are on any other wheel, just when you load in a default profile for SimHub. So on the software integration side of things, look, it is a pretty basic wheel. It gets the job done. It does all the things that it needs to do well. The one complaint that I have there, which might be a deal breaker for some people, is that the color of the LEDs doesn't necessarily match because they do have that blue kind of tint to them. But other than that, it does all the things it needs to do. Simple as that. So let's move on now into the driving experience. Okay, so let's have a little bit of a chat about the driving experience with the Cube Controls Astra wheel. And look, there's not really a whole lot to discuss here, because I mean, it delivered on all the things that I was expecting it to. Obviously, you're not expecting it to be the most versatile wheel in the world, being a butterfly style. But yeah, putting it through its paces with the types of cars that you would expect to be driving at a wheel of this style, it absolutely ticked all the boxes that I would expect it to for a wheel at this price point. And the thing that really stood out to me here is just like what we said about the F-Core years ago now. They've really nailed the fundamentals here. Everything that's important for the basic function of sim racing is all covered very, very well, with no major complaints, or if any complaints at all, really, to be honest with you guys. So ergonomically, very, very comfortable to drive with. The grips feel really nice in hand. No issues at all with reaching any of the buttons around the thumb area, so you don't have to reposition your hands to a significant extent when trying to make an adjustment mid-corner, which is something that I always look for. I really like the inclusion of thumb encoders here. We do see those on most wheels at this kind of price point though, so that's not really a standout feature. You do, of course, have to reposition your hands to manipulate the two rotary encoders on the front, but again, that would be the case with any wheel with those, so certainly not a complaint there. But yeah, no complaints at all with regards to ergonomics. Did really like the fact that they have these nice shrouds around the buttons, which make it very easy to feel exactly where you are. Once you get your head around it, you set some muscle memory in VR. A lot of other wheels just simply don't have that. All of the programmable RGB lighting all behaves as expected. Didn't come across any strange quirks or anything like that here. Brightness is absolutely fine there as well. But I think probably the standout thing that I noticed compared to other wheels in this market segment is just how light this wheel is. And as I was explaining before, that will have a positive impact, particularly for those who are driving on less powerful direct drive wheelbases, maybe under 10 Newton meters or so, for example. So yeah, absolutely no complaints across the board there in terms of delivering that core functionality. Where it does fall maybe a little bit short compared to some competitors is just in its extended functionality, because there really isn't anything here. Some other wheels these days do have some funky things going on with additional second layer features, like modifiers for the rotary encoders and so forth. At least at the time that we're making the video, we don't have any functionality like that built into Cube Controls software. But that's not to say they couldn't potentially implement something like that on the software side a little bit further down the track. So in conclusion, I would say that it does deliver on expectation. I don't think that there's anything particularly game-changing here by any means. And really beyond that, it is just ultimately going to boil down to subjective preference. I personally think that this is the best looking Cube Controls wheel that they've released so far. I'm not a big fan of a lot of these wheels that have plastic bits and all this intricate design going on that just makes the wheel look busy. I think they've struck a nice balance here between something that looks race car-esque, like something you would find in a real race car, and something that is visually clean and appealing and looks quite special on your rig as well. I do really like that glowing logo there. I know I'm not always a fan of branding all over sim racing wheels, and there certainly isn't a shortage of branding on this one either, but I do think that is quite a nice touch. And yeah, just everywhere I look, I think they've done a really good job. There are some other wheels at a similar price point these days that do offer similar functionality. Things like the Conspit 300 GT, for example, which while it is genuine carbon fiber and it does look very high quality, I would say in fairness that the quality of the touch points is a step below what we have presented here. SimMagic do, of course, have a couple of offerings as well. The FX, which is a very nice tidy wheel, quite significantly heavier than the Astra wheel. It does come with SimMagic's quick release, of course, as standard. You do have a USB-C connection there for connecting through if you want to use this wheel with other brand wheelbases. But I think this is probably the kind of wheel that's going to be more appealing to people that are already sort of within the SimMagic ecosystem, rather than something like this that's a little bit more generic. They, of course, do have their Neo as well, which does come in at quite a bit of a lower price point than this does. And this is a very versatile wheel. If you have a look at our full review of this wheel, they do offer a magnetic connection for the back as well, which makes it very easy to use this wheel with whatever wheelbase that you want. Again, it does come included with the NRG style quick release. You can swap that out to other quick releases if you want. It is significantly cheaper, and again, it does cover all the basics here, but the quality of the switch gear, you know, plastic touch points here, it's just not on the same level as what we're getting with the Astra wheel. There are a couple of other offerings from the likes of, say, VRS, for example. We've had a look at some of their wheels previously, so we're not going to go into a whole lot of detail again here now. And I would say overall the build quality and, you know, functionality is pretty much on par with a lot of those wheels, give or take a couple of features which may or may not be important to you, like Bluetooth connectivity and so forth. But yeah, to summarize here, I'd say if you're looking to prioritize build quality and driving feel over a feature-rich wheel, then this should definitely be near or at the top of your list in terms of value for money, subjective preference aside. And really, it's as simple as that, guys. So I really hope that today's video has helped you out. If it has, please do leave a thumbs up. Head over to our written review for a more detailed breakdown of pricing comparison, and of course, to check out our latest discount codes and affiliate links. Again, that's an amazing way of saving yourselves a little bit of money and helping support the channel at no additional cost. So we really appreciate your support there. But above all, guys, thank you very much for watching. And yeah, I'll see you again very soon. Bye.